The Catandrosians arrived in Earth's solar system without warning. Their ships, immense and gleaming, glided effortlessly through space. They made no attempt at subtlety. The sight of their arrival was impossible to ignore. The people of Earth looked up from their daily lives to witness the unknown. Their eyes filled with dread as the ships loomed overhead, blanketing entire cities in shadow. The sheer size of the fleet left the world stunned. The ships looked like nothing humans had ever seen. Metallic structures, impossibly smooth with intricate designs etched into their surfaces. Their presence was like an unspoken declaration that Earth was no longer the dominant force in its own sky. The broadcast began without any announcement. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through every communication channel of every nation. The words were calm, almost too calm, as if the speaker were addressing nothing more than an insignificant detail of their plans. "We are the Xandrosians, and you have been chosen. This planet will belong to us now. You will provide for us or be destroyed." There was no sign of aggression in the voice, yet its cold certainty sent a shiver through the hearts of all who heard it. The first wave of attacks was brief and devastating. Entire cities were reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes. The Xandrosians made no attempt at conversation, no demand for surrender, no negotiations. They simply showed their power, and it was enough to break any hope of resistance. In the early moments, entire nations scrambled to respond, but they were powerless against the alien force. Their technologies were like toys against the Xandrosian ships, whose weapons fired beams of energy that tore through the air, leaving only fire and destruction in their wake. Humanity could do nothing but watch in horror as the lights of their cities blinked out one by one. The Earth's defenses were barely a challenge. The best efforts of global militaries were like mosquitoes attacking a stone wall. The invaders' ships were impervious to anything thrown at them. They floated above every attempt to fight back, their energy shields shimmering with a strange light that absorbed every missile and bullet fired. In anger, the world's leaders met in panic. Some argued for peace, others for continued resistance. But there was no cohesion, no united front. The military had already collapsed in the face of overwhelming force. People were left to wonder if Earth had been doomed from the start. Then, just as quickly as the invaders appeared, they began to communicate again. But this time, it wasn't a cold demand. It was a challenge. A message was sent to the resistance, a final ultimatum. Humanity would have one chance to prove their worth. But the aliens were clear. There would be no mercy if they failed. It was then that a broadcast appeared across every screen and communication device. The voice familiar, the message simple, but laden with power. It echoed across the globe like a rallying cry. "We are the people of Earth, and we have fought for everything we have ever had. Do not think you can take that away from us. Not without a fight." The words burned with defiance. And for the first time in the hours since the invasion, humanity's collective heart pulsed with the hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as powerless as they seemed. The Xandrosians had made a mistake. They had overestimated their dominance and underestimated the will of those they sought to conquer. In the wake of the alien broadcast, something shifted deep within the heart of humanity. The panic that had swept across the world began to settle into something else. A quiet determination spread through every corner of the globe. It wasn't just a desire to survive anymore. It was the undeniable urge to fight back, to prove that Earth was more than a prize to be taken, that humanity was more than an afterthought. This wasn't a war that could be fought with sheer firepower alone. The Xandrosians had already demonstrated their overwhelming technological superiority. But what they hadn't anticipated was the human spirit, the ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. The world's scattered resistance movements began to coalesce into something larger, something more organized. Once again, humans found themselves working together. But this time it wasn't out of fear, it was out of hope. The first steps were small. The world's brightest minds, those in the fields of science, engineering, and technology, began to collaborate in secret, their resources limited but their ingenuity limitless. They scoured the planet's forgotten places, looking for anything that could be used against the invaders. The world's military leaders regrouped and restructured their forces. No longer were they fighting conventional battles. They began to experiment with new tactics. Guerrilla warfare had always been humanity's strength. Even against a superior foe, The resistance wasn't just about fighting back, it was about surviving long enough to learn and adapt. The first victories were small but significant. Scattered rebel groups found ways to disrupt the Xandrosian supply lines, targeting their weaker points with crude but effective weaponry. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was enough to send a message: the invaders weren't invincible, and the humans of Earth would not go quietly. It wasn't long before people began to realize something else about their planet, something that had been hidden from them for centuries. Ancient civilizations had left clues scattered across the globe about a power far greater than anything humanity had known, a power that was tied to the very Earth itself. It was there in the myths of old, the stories that spoke of great forces lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened. But no one had ever thought to truly search for it until now. The resistance became more than just a military force. It became a movement of discovery. Humans turned to forgotten knowledge and ancient texts. They began to study the natural forces of the planet in ways they had never done before. The Earth itself held secrets that could tip the scales in their favor. Researchers began to uncover signs of a power that had been dormant for millennia, ancient energy sources hidden beneath the surface, long ignored by modern science. Deep within the Earth, there were vast networks of energy waiting to be tapped into, and with every new discovery, humanity's resolve grew stronger. The resistance started to form alliances with groups that had once been considered fringe. They began to explore ancient sites in search of what was left behind by previous civilizations who had understood Earth's hidden power. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the Xandrosians had made a grave mistake in underestimating Earth. The planet wasn't just a resource, it was a weapon in and of itself, and humanity's survival would depend on how well they could harness it. The question was no longer whether they could fight back, it was how much of Earth's power could they control, and would it be enough to turn the tide against the invaders who believed they were unstoppable. The answer was starting to take shape in the most unlikely places, in the minds of those who refused to give up. The resistance, fueled by a growing sense of unity and purpose, turned their attention to the core of the Earth's secrets. Ancient texts and long-forgotten myths began to make sense in ways no one had expected. Researchers uncovered clues suggesting that deep beneath the Earth's crust, there was a force, an energy, capable of immense destruction and creation. This wasn't the kind of power that could be harnessed by technology alone. It was raw, primal, connected to the planet itself, something that the Xandrosians couldn't possibly comprehend with their advanced technology. The knowledge had been hidden for a reason, and as humanity's brightest minds worked tirelessly to uncover it, the planet itself seemed to respond, as if it too recognized the urgency of the situation. The more they discovered, the more humanity realized the true nature of the energy that had lain dormant beneath their feet for centuries. It wasn't just geological or magnetic. It was elemental, harnessing the forces of nature itself, tectonic activity, gravitational shifts, the power of the atmosphere, and even the energy stored in Earth's oceans. It was no ordinary weapon. It was a force of nature, and for the first time, humanity knew they weren't fighting with their backs against the wall anymore. They were playing a game of their own. The resistance quickly shifted its focus. Instead of engaging in direct military confrontation, they began to test ways to tap into this newfound power. Engineers and physicists worked alongside geologists and archaeologists, using old maps, ruins, and technology that had once been considered primitive to create devices that could unlock this energy. They learned to manipulate the Earth's natural forces, shaping them into weapons, ones that were beyond the Xandrosians' understanding. It wasn't just about bombs and guns anymore. Humanity was learning to control the very environment around them. As the first tremors of Earth's power were felt across the globe, the Xandrosians took notice. At first, they dismissed it as a fluke, a coincidence. How could a species with such primitive technology threaten them in any meaningful way? But when massive earthquakes began to shake the ground beneath their command centers, and sudden storms of unprecedented ferocity tore through their fleets, their confidence began to crack. The invaders had never faced anything like this before. They were used to conquering worlds, to asserting their dominance with precision and control. But Earth was not like the planets they had subdued. This was a world of chaos and wild, untapped power. The Exandrosians scrambled to understand what was happening, but their technology, so advanced in so many ways, was ill-equipped to comprehend the forces at work. Earth's unpredictable nature was unlike anything they had ever encountered. They launched probes to investigate the disturbances, but even their best efforts to study the planet's anomalies were met with failure. Whatever was happening, it was beyond their ability to control. Meanwhile, the resistance continued to grow stronger, driven by the success of their early experiments. Small victories were turning into larger successes, with local populations rallying around the idea that humanity had found its strength in the planet itself. They learned to communicate with the energy, refining their techniques and finding new ways to turn natural disasters into weapons of war. The more they connected with the Earth's forces, the more they realized how little the invaders understood of the true nature of their world. The first major demonstration of Earth's power came in the form of a volcanic eruption, one that had been triggered by the Resistance's newly developed technology. The eruption wasn't just a natural event. It was a message. The Exandrosian command center, located on the coast, was engulfed in a tsunami of molten rock, their high-tech shields failing to protect them from the raw fury of the Earth's retaliation. It was a stunning blow, and the aliens realized, too late, that they had underestimated the planet they had come to conquer. As humanity celebrated its first true victory, a new determination settled over the people of Earth. They had a weapon now, one that the Exandrosians couldn't fight with their technology or their might. The battle was no longer about brute force. It was about understanding the very world they were fighting to protect. The message was clear now. Earth had given its warning, and the invaders had ignored it. The Resistance knew that the war was far from over, but for the first time, they had a real chance at winning. As the Resistance celebrated its initial victories, the reality of the war set in. The Exandrosians, despite their disbelief and frustration, were not easily defeated. The initial tremors of Earth's power had shaken them, but they quickly adapted, retreating to their most secure strongholds and fortifying their positions. They began to recalibrate their strategies, deploying more advanced countermeasures, and attempting to study Earth's unpredictable nature with even more diligence. However, every time they thought they had a solution, Earth itself threw something new at them. Storms that changed direction, magnetic shifts that scrambled their technology, and natural disasters that seemed to strike without warning. But as the invaders regrouped, humanity's efforts grew more focused. The more the Resistance learned, the more they understood about how to harness Earth's elemental forces. Earth wasn't just a source of raw power. It was an ally in their fight, waiting for humanity to unlock its full potential. With every new breakthrough, they began to realize that the key to defeating the Exandrosians lay in this ancient energy, and the closer they got to mastering it, the stronger their resolve became. Humanity's scientists, working in secret, developed devices that could manipulate the Earth's magnetic fields, tap into seismic energy, and even control local weather patterns. Earth's hidden forces were now being used with precision, turning natural disasters into tools of war. In one case, a carefully timed shift in tectonic plates caused a massive earthquake that devastated an entire Exandrosian supply base, while another team used a focused energy surge to cause a massive electrical storm, frying their weapons and disabling entire fleets. Each victory, while small in the grand scheme of things, sent ripples across the alien command. The Exandrosians were beginning to panic, realizing that their superior technology was no match for the primal, raw power of a world they had underestimated. At the same time, something deeper began to stir within humanity. The world had always been divided by borders, ideologies, and cultures, but now those divisions seemed trivial in comparison to the larger struggle they all faced. People who had once been enemies began to work together in ways they never had before. Soldiers from different nations, once sworn rivals, now stood side by side in makeshift command centers, sharing intelligence and resources. Scientists, engineers, and old historians who had been dismissed as dreamers began to prove that the myths they had once been laughed at for studying contained more truth than anyone could have imagined. Every new piece of knowledge about Earth's hidden power was treated like a sacred treasure. Long-forgotten texts and ancient maps were studied with reverence, as if they held the secrets to victory. The very history of the planet, its people, its cultures, and its stories, became part of the fight. The resistance was no longer a group of scattered, desperate rebels. They had become a unified force, and their efforts were beginning to turn the tide of the war. However, despite their successes, the Gandrosians were far from finished. They began to escalate their attacks, bringing in more advanced weapons and even more powerful ships. They attempted to use Earth's own resources against them, drilling deeper into the planet's crust in search of new materials to fuel their war machines. But every move they made seemed to push the planet's defenses further into motion, as if Earth itself was retaliating for every slight. The invaders couldn't control the forces they were tampering with, and in doing so, they only worsened their situation. In response, the resistance began to plan their next move. They knew that humanity's survival no longer rested on simply fighting back. It rested on harnessing the very forces of nature, using the planet itself as a weapon. With this in mind, they began to organize a final assault, a coordinated strike against the Xandrosian strongholds using the full power of Earth's elemental forces. It was a gamble, a final test of everything they had learned, but there was no turning back now. Humanity was prepared to fight to the last, knowing that their only chance for survival rested on this last, desperate effort. The stakes had never been higher. The Xandrosians had overstepped. And now, Earth was ready to make them pay. The final assault was set in motion with a precision that shocked even the most optimistic members of the resistance. Every available resource, every scrap of knowledge, every breakthrough they had achieved was now focused on a single objective: to strike back at the Xandrosians in a way that would cripple their invasion once and for all. The plan was nothing short of audacious, an intricate series of attacks designed not just to weaken the invaders, but to dismantle their hold on Earth entirely. And for the first time, humanity was not reacting to the invaders' moves. They were in control. It began with a series of earthquakes, carefully orchestrated using the energy manipulation techniques the resistance had perfected. The Xandrosian strongholds, once thought to be impenetrable, began to tremble as tectonic plates were shifted in precisely calculated ways. What the invaders didn't know was that these seismic waves weren't random. Each was designed to destabilize a key part of their infrastructure. The shockwaves tore through their underground bunkers, disrupting their power sources and communication networks, sending chaos rippling through their ranks. At the same time, an alliance of human nations launched a coordinated attack on the remaining Xandrosian supply lines. Their weapons, powered by Earth's own energy, struck with a force that left the aliens scrambling to defend themselves. Lightning storms, summoned from the very heart of the planet's atmosphere, tore through their fleets. The Xandrosians, who had once laughed off humanity's primitive technology, now found themselves faced with an enemy they could not predict or control. The sky itself seemed to be fighting against them. But the most devastating blow came from the oceans. Using the deep-sea currents and gravitational anomalies the resistance had learned to manipulate, they unleashed a wave of monstrous proportions, an oceanic tsunami aimed directly at the heart of the Xandrosian command center. The resistance had calculated everything. The timing was perfect. The wave crashed into the invaders' largest fleet, sending ships, advanced weaponry, and key personnel into the depths of the ocean. It was a brutal reminder that Earth's power wasn't just in its atmosphere or its crust. It was in the oceans, the magnetic fields, and every corner of the planet. The Xandrosians had never considered that they might be fighting a world that could fight back with the same ferocity they had shown in their conquest of countless other worlds. The invaders were not prepared for this level of disruption. Their technological superiority couldn't compete with the chaos of nature. Their advanced shielding failed to stop the earthquakes, their energy weapons couldn't counter the elemental storms, and their fleets, once invulnerable, were sinking beneath the waves. The resistance had struck at the very core of the Xandrosian invasion. The Xandrosian forces, once so confident in their dominance, were now fighting for survival. Their communications were shattered, their fleets in disarray, their soldiers confused and demoralized. With each victory, the human resolve grew stronger. They were no longer just defending their home. They were taking back control of it. The world began to rally around the resistance, with civilians turning into soldiers, engineers transforming into warriors. Those who had once hidden in fear now stood tall, knowing that humanity's strength lay not in technology alone, but in their unity, their adaptability, and their understanding of the world they fought to protect. But the battle was far from over. The Xandrosians still had resources, still had firepower, and they were not ready to admit defeat. But the humans knew one thing for certain: they had awakened something that the invaders could never comprehend. The Xandrosians had underestimated humanity's connection to Earth, and now, as the final phase of the battle loomed, they would learn the true cost of overstepping. The resistance wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to reclaim their world. And Earth was with them. As the battle raged on, the resistance felt a growing sense of momentum. Every strike they made, every piece of Earth's power they harnessed, seemed to hit harder than the last. The Xandrosians, once so confident in their superiority, were starting to show cracks. Their fleet was in tatters, their strongholds shattered, and their soldiers, once filled with arrogance, now faced the unimaginable. They were losing to a species they had deemed unworthy of attention. But even in the face of defeat, the Xandrosian leadership was not ready to surrender. They had underestimated Earth and its people, but they still had one last ace to play, a final weapon that had been kept secret until now. This weapon, unlike anything they had used before, was a colossal device built beneath the Earth's surface, designed to tap into the planet's core and release a catastrophic burst of energy, one that would obliterate the planet and leave nothing behind. It was a last-ditch effort to ensure that if they couldn't conquer Earth, they would at least destroy it. The resistance learned of the weapon just as it was nearing activation. The urgency of the situation was clear. They had only hours to stop it before the Earth would be reduced to rubble. The decision was made. There was no more time for hesitation. This was the final battle, the one that would determine the fate of humanity and the planet itself. With their knowledge of Earth's energy forces, the resistance mobilized quickly. They weren't just preparing for another military assault. They were preparing for a mission to the very core of the Earth itself. They would need to infiltrate the Xandrosian device, disable it from within, and unleash the planet's full power to prevent the destruction of their world. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If they failed, humanity would be wiped out, and Earth would be left to the invaders' mercy. Teams of the best and brightest humans, scientists, engineers, soldiers, and adventurers, were chosen for the mission. Their goal was clear: to reach the core of the Earth, shut down the Xandrosian weapon, and use the power of the planet to reverse the damage the invaders had done. It wasn't just about survival. It was about taking control of their destiny, ensuring that Earth, not the Xandrosians, was the one who held the ultimate power. The journey to the core was nothing short of perilous. The deeper they went, the more unstable the environment became. The resistance had to fight against not only the Xandrosian forces guarding the device, but also the natural forces of the planet itself. Tremors shook the ground beneath them, magma threatened to burst through the walls, and the pressure from deep within the Earth's crust was almost unbearable. But despite the odds, they pressed on. They had come too far, and failure was not an option. As they reached the Xandrosian device, the full scale of the weapon became clear. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, massive and intricately designed, a fusion of alien technology and raw, untamed Earth energy. The device was tapping directly into the planet's core, drawing power from the heart of the Earth itself, preparing to unleash destruction on a global scale. The Resistance's engineers worked frantically, using their newfound knowledge of Earth's forces to sabotage the device. It wasn't just about shutting it down. It was about redirecting the power back to Earth, using it as a weapon against the invaders. The battle between the human forces and the Xandrosian guards was fierce, but in the end, humanity's ingenuity prevailed. The device, once a symbol of the Xandrosians' dominance, was now their undoing. As the device began to power down, the Earth's energy, instead of being unleashed in destruction, began to flow back into the planet, becoming a weapon that humanity could control. The Resistance had succeeded. They had taken control of Earth's latent power, and now, with the Xandrosians' final weapon disabled, it was time to deliver the final blow. The Earth was ready to fight back. The invaders had overstepped, and they would not be allowed to destroy this world. The Resistance, now empowered by the very forces they had once feared, stood united against the invaders, ready to finish what they had started. The final phase of the war had begun, and humanity was no longer a species on the brink of extinction. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Xandrosians had made their greatest mistake. They had underestimated Earth, and now the planet's full wrath was about to be unleashed. With the Xandrosian weapon neutralized and Earth's latent energy now under human control, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. The Resistance, having unlocked the planet's raw elemental forces, now found themselves in possession of a power that was unlike anything the invaders could ever comprehend. The Earth had become a living weapon, an unstoppable force ready to turn the tide of the war in ways the Xandrosians had never anticipated. The initial rush of victory gave way to cold determination. The Earth's forces were ready for the final push, but it was clear that the fight wasn't over. The Xandrosians, still reeling from the loss of their weapon, were desperate. They knew that if they didn't make their last stand now, they would be forced into retreat, and Earth would be forever free from their grasp. And so they prepared for a battle unlike any before, bringing their remaining forces together for a last desperate defense. The final assault from the Xandrosians came in waves. Massive ships descending from orbit, their weapons blazing with a fury that shook the heavens. But this time, humanity was not caught off guard. With Earth's energy at their command, the Resistance had already prepared for this moment. The sky itself seemed to bend to their will. Storms erupted across the atmosphere, massive lightning bolts crackling through the sky, blasting the Xandrosian ships out of the air. The Earth was fighting back, and its power surged in ways the invaders couldn't predict. On the ground, the Resistance pushed forward, using everything at their disposal. Advanced energy weapons, powered by Earth's own forces, tore through the remaining alien soldiers. The invaders' once impenetrable armor was no match for the forces now at humanity's command. Seismic charges, designed to mimic the force of a volcanic eruption, sent shockwaves through Xandrosian fortifications, crumbling their defenses. Every weapon they had developed from the Earth's power was a piece of nature's wrath, amplified and focused by human ingenuity. But the Xandrosians were far from finished. They retaliated with their own terrifying weapon, a massive energy cannon, capable of devastating entire regions with a single shot. It was their last hope, their final bid to break the human spirit. The cannon was positioned at the heart of their command ship, a looming, indestructible fortress suspended in the sky. As it charged, the Xandrosian leader issued a final, chilling command: to fire the weapon and wipe out the last of humanity's resistance. The moment the cannon discharged, it sent a beam of concentrated energy toward Earth's surface, a blast so powerful that it threatened to tear the planet apart. The world held its breath as the beam collided with the Earth's atmosphere, sending a shockwave that rippled across the globe. For a moment, it seemed as if all was lost. The Resistance watched in horror as the sky lit up with a blinding flash of light. But then, something remarkable happened. The Earth's forces, now fully awakened and under humanity's control, responded to the threat. A massive wave of energy surged from the planet's core, meeting the Xandrosian cannon's blast head-on. The two forces clashed in an explosion of light and power that shook the heavens, sending shockwaves rippling across the solar system. Earth's energy, amplified by humanity's ingenuity, was too much for the Xandrojan weapon to handle. The cannon exploded in a burst of raw energy, tearing through the Xandrojan flagship. The massive ship, once thought to be invulnerable, was engulfed in fire and debris, its towering form disintegrating into nothingness. The shockwave from the explosion sent the remaining Xandrojan forces reeling, disorienting them long enough for the final assault to begin. Humanity, now fully united and empowered by the planet itself, launched a relentless counterattack. The resistance swept across the battlefield, pushing the invaders back with every step. The tide of the war had turned, and the Xandrojans, once so confident in their superior technology, now found themselves fighting against the very planet they had sought to conquer. The last of the Xandrojan forces, their morale shattered and their strength broken, began to retreat. Earth had proven to be far more than just a battleground. It had become humanity's greatest ally. The invaders who had come to Earth thinking they could dominate it now realized the cost of underestimating the planet and its people. The Earth had fought back, and in doing so, it had given humanity the strength to finish the fight. The final battle was won, and humanity stood victorious. Earth had been saved, not by superior technology, but by the strength of its people and the power of the world they had fought to protect. In the aftermath of the final battle, the world stood in stunned silence, processing the unimaginable. Humanity had defeated the Xandrojans, and Earth had been saved. The sky, once clouded with the remnants of war, now shimmered with the golden hues of a new dawn. Across the globe, people stood together in unity, not just as survivors, but as victors. The resistance had become more than a military force. It had become a symbol of humanity's resilience and ability to adapt, to fight, and to survive against all odds. The Xandrojans, broken and scattered, had retreated into the stars. Their once formidable fleets were now nothing more than wreckage drifting through space. The invaders had thought they could conquer this world, exploit its resources, and subjugate its people. Instead, they had awakened something within Earth, something ancient, primal, and powerful, that turned the tables on their conquest. They had overstepped, and in doing so, had become the architects of their own defeat. Humanity now found itself at a crossroads. The victory was hard-won, and the cost had been immense. Cities lay in ruins, entire populations had been displaced, and many lives had been lost. But the true battle wasn't just about survival. It was about rebuilding, about reclaiming a future that had almost been stolen from them. The people of Earth had tasted victory, but they knew that their real challenge now was to heal, to rebuild, and to ensure that this never happened again. The world's nations, once divided by borders and ideologies, now found common ground. The lines that had once separated them began to blur as humans came together in the face of a shared global triumph. With the Xandrojans' defeat, Earth was no longer just a battlefield. It was a symbol of unity, of a species that could overcome even the most insurmountable odds when they stood together. Scientists, engineers, and historians, once scattered and isolated in their research, now worked together to understand the ancient powers they had unlocked. The secrets of Earth's elemental forces were no longer just myth. They were a tangible, powerful resource that had helped save the world. Humanity began to harness this newfound energy for peaceful purposes, rebuilding cities, cleaning the planet's oceans, and using the power to develop sustainable technologies. Earth's natural forces, once a weapon of war, were now a means of healing and progress. But even as they celebrated their victory, there was a sense of cautious vigilance. The Xandrojans may have retreated, but Earth had learned a valuable lesson. Its survival would always depend on its ability to adapt and defend itself. The resistance had proven that the planet was far more than a resource to be exploited. It was a living, breathing entity, and humanity's connection to it was more profound than anyone had ever realized. The leaders of the world gathered to draft a new treaty, one that would ensure humanity's unity and the protection of the planet from any future threats. Earth was no longer a place to be conquered or controlled. It was a sanctuary, a home, and a force in its own right. Humanity had learned that the real power wasn't in technology alone. It was in understanding the world they lived in, respecting it, and fighting to protect it. As the years passed, Earth's scars began to heal, but the lessons of the war were never forgotten. The Xandrosian invasion had been catastrophic, but it had also sparked a global awakening. Humanity had found its strength not in the weapons they wielded, but in their unity, their connection to the Earth, and their refusal to be conquered. The message to the universe was clear. Earth would never again be an easy target, and humanity would never again let their world be threatened. And as the stars shone brightly overhead, a new chapter began for Earth. A chapter of peace, resilience, and the promise that no matter how many challenges lay ahead, humanity would always rise to meet them. The fight for Earth was over, but the future was just beginning.